So that was a lot, but now we have our scenes and we can move on to our platform style scene. So again, for your project, you might only have like the RPG style scenes with like text and narrative and images. Or if you're using an arcade style, then you could have both. So I'm going to go over how to create those platform scenes as their own separate scene. Those are actually going to be a lot easier because they're pretty much all the same. The main difference is like how many snakes they are, what the background color is. So you only really need one class for that. And almost all of that is already part of our function-based code. So if we look in sketch.js, we have this like game scene, and we even have the setup game. So like, you know, this is basically all this code is already written. I'm just going to go over the structure of the scene. We'll also have to add in like the obstacles, the little snakes. So we'll have to make a new object for that. And then we just have like one more scene style, the little prompts to do, and then we'll be done. So I'm going to close this out. So we do need to access these. So in our beginning scene, let's add a second portal. So we're going to say let snake portal equal new portal. So we'll put one snake portal in each scene. So we'll say fight the snakes here. And we'll put this on the other side. So we'll just say like 200x and let's say height minus 300. And the scene this will go to, we'll just call this easy again. I used easy. Well, okay, I have middle, so that's good. So I have middle, beginning, middle, end, easy, medium, hard. Obviously, you can use whatever name you want here as long as they match up. And we'll say this dot portals dot push snake portal. Okay, so now we have another portal, and we can go fight the snakes. We're going to get an error because we haven't created that scene yet. So let's just save this. And so now this is a completely different class of scenes. So we're not going to be doing any extending. We're just going to make a new class. So let's get rid of this. I'm going to make a new file, and this is our class platform scene. And I'm going to save that as PlatformScene.js and make sure to add this script before I forget. PlatformScene.js. I've got a lot of files now, but most of them are pretty short, so that's nice. So we need a constructor, and then here's the way with our map scenes, we made a bunch of different classes because they had a lot of different stuff going on. Platform scene, pretty much the same thing is happening each time. The only difference is like the background color and the number of obstacles. So those we'll use as the arguments to our constructor. So we'll have like a BG color, and then we'll have a min and max for obstacles. Pretty straightforward. I guess I could use min obstacles here. It's kind of a long word, but we want to be specific with our variable names. So we got to save those first. BG color equals BG color. This dot min obstacles equals min obstacles. This dot max obstacles equals max obstacles. And then with our platform scene, we can like replay these. And so we don't want to like set everything here. Like our scenery we can set here if it's not going to change, but the obstacles that we're adding to the scene, we actually are going to be like resetting those. That's why we have in our functional version, we have this like whole big setup game function. So we don't have to do a lot of this stuff because we're not like routing through all these different functions, but we do have to do, you know, the basic stuff here. So we're not going to put those in the constructor. We're going to put those in the setup function. Fortunately, I already have a setup function being called in my change scene function, so I don't have to worry about setting that part up. And so just like in our map scenes, first we're going to set the player position. So we'll say player.x equals 200. Let's make sure that's right. Yeah. So that's the same as Jerry equals 200. And then, we have the ground. So let's put in the ground here. We'll say this dot ground y equals 200. And that's actually something, again, if you wanted to have different ground levels in your different scenes, you could put that as an argument and then, you know, change this here. I'm going to leave them all the same for now. So I'll just say player y equals height minus ground y. I'm just going to keep it the same as what we had before. And then I'm going to need, so instead of saving these different positions, I'm just going to instantiate a whole bunch of objects. So I need something to hold those in. So let's create an obstacles array. And the reason I'm calling this obstacles rather than snakes is because you might want to add, not just snakes, but also something else, or you might have a different name for it. So it's good to use like general things here, like we did with the foreground and the background before. So when I do setup, I want to reset obstacles. That's easy to do with an array because I just have to reset it to an empty array. So empty the array. So that way we remove all the old snakes from if we lost or even if we won, we remove those previous snakes. Then we get a random number based on our min and max. So I'm going to copy this, put it in here. This time, instead of min snakes, max snakes, we have this dot min obstacles. So I'll put that there. And this dot max obstacles. Okay. And I'm just going to put n here for number. And then I just have a loop for let I equals 0. Start counting at 0. I is less than n. So we count up to n, I plus plus. We're going to make a new obstacle. So we say let obstacle equal new game. Oh, and here's where we actually need to make, we do need to make an obstacle class. I'm actually here going to make a snake class because if we are going to add different obstacles, they're going to have their own properties, but they are going to extend the game object. So I'm going to make a new snake class. And that way I can add the image as well. So for this one, I'll just put the X value. So the X value I derived with this formula up here. I'm going to copy that. And I'll put this as another variable just so we can see it separately. So random width over 2 to width plus I times width over 2. That looks fine. So that'll be my X value for my snake. And then we need the Y value. That's going to be the same as the player Y. So I'll just copy this and paste it in there. And that looks good. And I think that's everything. We don't need to do this because we have our main scene change function. Awesome. So let's make our snake object and then we'll come back to this draw function. I'm just going to put that in there as a placeholder. So sorry I'm jumping around a bit, but since we did want to make all these snakes, let's just make our snake object. So we're going to make another game object. We do need this collision function, so it's nice that we already have it. We do need the draw function, and we can see the constructor here. So I'm going to make a new window. I'm going to save this as snake.js. And I'm going to remember to add this to our classes. So this is a game object. I'm going to put it up here with the game objects. So class snake, and it extends the game objects so that we get the collision, the draw, etc. So we're going to do a constructor. So we know this is going to be a snake. So we're going to call the super constructor. And the first thing we're going to do is use the snake image. And then we're getting the X and the Y from over here, X and Y. And so then we'll just throw those X and Y into our regular game object. And then we just need an update function. So the snakes are moving kind of like our clouds. So let's see, where are our clouds? Yeah, so cloud.js, we just have this update function. And we don't need to worry about resetting the snakes because they're just going to go by once. So we just need to say this.x minus equals, and then here actually we could do a speed. So let's say this dot speed equals, let's start with 10, and if we need to we can change that later. So this dot x minus this dot speed. Another nice thing about classes is I can just use speed and speed even though my player already has a speed variable. Since it's encapsulated within the class, I don't have to worry about overwriting it. I think that's basically everything I need. If I want to add other stuff to the snake, I can always do that later. So let's close these guys. Go back to our platform scene. So let's finish the draw. So I'm going to copy a lot of this code from here. So I'm just going to grab this and throw it in here. And this is just saying background is BG color. We have to make sure to change it to this now since we're using objects. No stroke is whatever, fill light green. And then we have the ground here. I don't actually have to change anything here because these are all global variables. Height. Oh, actually, this is this dot ground y now. Width is global, this dot ground y. So that's our little background. I'm going to ignore the clouds for now. You guys can add your scenery. Let's apply our gravity. I'm going to copy this and paste it in. And yeah, sorry, I'm just kind of like doing a ton of code here. But we've already kind of gone over how this stuff works. I don't want to spend a lot of time reviewing everything. We are going to have to update a lot of stuff here. So now instead of Jerry, we have player.x. Instead of ground y, we have this dot ground y. And then we don't have a gravity variable. That's another thing that could actually be, you could have a platform scene that's in outer space. So let's make the gravity part of this. So we'll say gravity equals 2. I think that's what I set it to before. Yeah. This is going to be this dot gravity. And I guess if it can be different, it's not really a constant anymore. So let's just use a regular variable name. And then here's something we're actually going to have to update our player. So we don't have a y speed. We're going to need that. So I guess the speed will be for the map scenes. Y speed will be for this jumping scene. If you're not jumping, you don't really need it. But so let's go to the player. So you might not need this if you don't have like this platform, but I'm going to say y speed equals, I'll stick with 3 for this. Then this Jerry y speed is player.y speed. This is jumping. So this becomes player.is jumping. Okay, so that wasn't too bad. Apply gravity. Okay, so then the next part is the jump button. So 32 is space for jumping. So here we have to say player.is jumping. And then replace this with y speed and this dot jumping. So I'm not going to go over how this physics works again because I went over it in the previous video. I'm just moving all this stuff in here. So then this one, obviously we need to update the player speed. So we say player.y speed equals, this is player.y plus equals player.y speed. So that updates the player position. And then we actually don't need this part because that's part of the player. If the player's jumping, they'll draw the player image. Okay, so then we draw our obstacles. Okay, so this is going to look a bit different. So we're going to say for let I equals 0, I is less than this dot obstacles dot length, I plus plus. Another way that we can do this, so remember when I was doing my map scene, when I had the portal, I had to write this dot portals at I 4 separate times. And so that starts to get tedious, right? It's kind of long. So something that you'll see often, I think that people have different feelings about this approach, but something that you can do is I can say let obstacle equal this dot obstacles at I, and now I have a scoped obstacle variable that will stop existing when I get out of the for loop. And so I can just go with that for everything else. I can say obstacle dot draw to draw the snake and obstacle dot update to update the snake. I guess we should update before we draw because the snakes are moving. With the cloud, it doesn't matter quite as much because they're not colliding with the character, but with the snakes, we do want to update before we draw, so we do see that collision that's happening. So we're going to update and draw, and then we have to do the collision, of course. So just like we did in our snake function, that's like way down here. See, this is why functional code is crazy. I had to repeat this whole collision function, and I actually changed it a bit, so maybe we can do that. Let's add our collision code here. So if obstacle.collide player. So if the player runs into the snake, we're going to change the scene to lose, right? Yeah, so we'll change the scene to lose. We don't have that scene yet, but that's the last thing we're going to do. We'll change the scene to lose. And thinking about it now, there's going to be different platform scenes. So we're going to need to know what scene we just lost. So I'm gonna add current scene as another argument, so that way we know what scene we're actually playing when we lose, so we can go back to it. So that's a global current scene variable. And then we have our winning condition. So if I equals this dot obstacles dot length minus 1. So that tells us it's the last one. And player X is greater than obstacle dot X. So all the obstacles have passed the player. So if that's true, then we just win. So we'll say change scene win. And it doesn't matter where we are if we won, because we're just going to go back to the regular scene. Okay, I'm sure there's going to be bugs. Let's give it a shot. Okay, so we go to our snake scene, fight the snakes, and we already have an error. Cannot read property of undefined. You know what I didn't do is actually add this scene to our main program. Okay, so scenes.easy equals new platform scene. And what are our arguments? The background color, so that's light blue. The min and max obstacles. So for the easy one, let's do 5 to 7, or let's do 4 to 7. Okay, so I just forgot to actually create the scene in my main code. Oh, and okay, I just forgot that this dot platform scene 15, this dot ground Y. I'm probably gonna have like a bunch of those. Okay, let's try it again. Same thing. 22, this dot ground Y. Okay, well I see it. I don't see any snakes. I don't see my player. I think I did forget to draw the player. So let's say player.draw. Okay, so my player got drawn, but he fell through the ground. Player, oops, I put player.x, not player.y. Okay, so now I'm on the ground, I'm jumping, but there's no snakes. I can inspect here to try to figure this out. So I have scenes.easy, and it's got all my stuff in here, and there's no obstacles. Oh, I never pushed the snake onto the obstacles array. So this is just one obstacle, so I have to say this.obstacles.push obstacle. There we go. Oh, okay, so it's actually working. Okay, we don't have a lose scene, so that makes sense. That's the last thing we're gonna do. One of the problems here is that my snake gets me before I'm really even touching it, which is because of all the alpha in all of my images. But the problem is if I want to change my collide function, it's going to change for every single game object. So I could rewrite the collide function for just the snake or the obstacle. If I wanted to do that, like I could go to snake.js and add a new collide function and just change these numbers. But I don't really want to do that. Let's just try, I'm going to try making this like collision area a bit smaller. And so essentially what I'm doing here, just so basically the collision area that I have right now, if this is my player, I have this like box, and then the box extends to however far the art extends. So if like the arms are way out here, you know, the box has a lot of empty space here and here and here. And the middle of the player is right here. And so when I say plus half, I'm using like the whole box. So what I'm going to do, it's not going to be very accurate. It's not super sophisticated. There's a lot of better ways to do this, but I'm just going to basically cut that in half. So I'm going to say a quarter, a quarter, a quarter, a quarter. So I'm going to make the hitbox smaller than the outsides of the art. So that way I'll have to get closer to things to collide, but I think it's actually going to be fine. So one thing is the signs aren't going to light up until I'm like right on them. But I don't think that's so bad, especially if these were actual real portals with like a middle. That would kind of make sense. Anyway, when I hit enter, okay, so now the snake is really on me, which is what I wanted. Okay, so let's try this again. Okay, so now I can really play the game a lot better. So you could just add a new collide function to the snake object and change these numbers around if you wanted to do it that way. So now we've got our scenes, and we've got our snakes. Let's add the medium and hard scenes. So we'll say scenes.medium equals new platform scene. This is the background color. So I think I said dark blue, and we'll add 8 to 10 snakes. And then we'll say scenes.hard equals new platform scene. And this one we'll do purple, do 11 to 15, so it can get really hard. And then we need portals to go into each one of those scenes. So for the middle scene, we'll go to medium. So I'll say so I'm just gonna call it the same thing, snake portal, because it doesn't really matter if it has the same name, it's in a different object. Fight the snakes. Let's put this in the middle of that scene, so it's like halfway down to the end scene. And then we need a name for this is medium. And this .portals.push snake portal. And I'm just gonna run through and test to make sure that these are there. And so let's just copy this, go to the end scene, paste it in here. That's the only portal for this one. And so this one is for hard, everything else we'll just leave the same. Okay, so now we have a snake scene here and down here. Okay, cool. Now we have two signs, fight snakes or enter the abyss. And now we just have this last one right here in the middle. That's the hardest one. Let's actually move it to the other side of the screen. So we'll say width minus 200. This has taken up a lot more time than I expected, but that's okay. We're almost done. We just have to finish our win and lose scene. And so looking at this, we can see that most of these things are exactly the same. The text size, fill, etc. The only thing that's different here is the instructions, or the title and the instruction. And then the key is different, but we're gonna look at using a class. It's a little bit easier to do some, to add a value in there to make sure that we can use the same key. So that's the last class that we're gonna make. And we're gonna treat this class like a scene, but it's gonna be called a prompt. And I kind of discussed this a bit before, but we have our scenes. We have our scene, and we're gonna also have a prompt. The main difference is that the scene, it has graphics, it has all this stuff. The prompt is really just like some information that we either have to say like okay or whatever. And so we don't need a whole scene for that. The main thing is that they're both gonna have a draw function and a setup function. So as long as they both have those things, I can put my prompts into my scene object, because the setup function could get called or the draw function could get called. Let's go ahead and make a prompt class. So I'm gonna make a new file and save as. This is capital P prompts.js. And we're gonna say class prompt and start with our constructor. This is the last one, so we're almost there. So the things that are different, again, are the title, the instruction, and I think that's it. I guess where they end up going, one of them goes back to the main. Oh, actually, you know what? If we win, we still have to go to the current scene, so we'll figure out a way to do that. So we just need the title, the instruction. So we're gonna say this.title equals title. This.instruction equals instruction. Then let's do our setup function. And this is gonna have a scene name. And so this will be the scene that we go to when we enter the prompt. So let's just say this.scene to open. I think that's what we called it in the portal. Then in our draw function, I'm gonna copy this over from our win function. And just make everything look nice. And so the first thing that changes is right here, the title. So instead of you win, it's gonna say, either you win or you lose. So we'll say this.title. And then the instruction could change based on where you're gonna go. So let's call this .instruction. Then the last thing here is we wanna use the enter key no matter what. So let's say our event here, we had that issue with our functions. This is a little bit easier to solve with classes. Basically, we're going to start the event when the player hits the button, and then when they release it, we're going to end the event. So we'll have two if statements. So it'll be a little simpler. So we'll say if key is down, enter. And basically, we're going to create a little Boolean to make sure that they haven't already started this. So we'll say enter started. And it'll be false when they start. So this will prevent this triggering more than once as we go to the next scene. So as long as this dot enter started is not true, then this dot enter started equals true. So this means that they've started to hit the enter key, but we want to wait until they stop, till they release the enter key to actually change the scene. So now we'll say if this dot enter started, and the way we know that they're not holding the key anymore is we can just use the global P5 event, not key is pressed. This tells us that no key is pressed. There are some like edge cases where if you hit enter and then hold some other keys and then release it, it won't work, but we're not going to account for that in this class example. So if all that works, we're going to say change scene, and then we're going to go to this dot scene to open. So we have to make sure that that exists. So we'll add that to our setup. So let's add our two prompts to sketch.js. Scenes.win equals new prompt. You win, and hit enter to return to map. And then scenes.lose equals new prompt. You lose, and hit enter to try again. And it is a little cruel because we don't let them just like give up on the game. I noticed you could add like a button to like leave, so that you would just have to kind of like recreate that. You could actually add a whole button class if you wanted to like be really fancy with it, but I think that would be good. So I did add this scene name to change the current scene. I think the thing that we need to figure out is with those prompts. So, okay, so it's actually in the platform scene. So if I lose, it tells me the current scene, and I need to do that if I win too. So I'm gonna say current scene here. And so I can add that as an argument to the change scene, or let's call this next scene because we're not actually opening that scene quite yet. And so then when we set up our prompts, we'll use the next scene. And nice thing about JavaScript is if we don't have this, it'll just ignore it. So most of our setup functions don't bother with the next scene, but our prompt does. If we got more complicated, that might be an issue. But for now, with our setup, I think that's going to be fine. And of course, I was going to do it once. I forgot to add my prompt. So let's go down here, prompt.js. So now we can lose a game. Okay, that worked. And it actually worked. Now it didn't work. I remember what I did wrong. Back to the prompt. So once I set this entered to true, I need to send it back to false. Otherwise, that's what happens, is it's always true. So this dot started equals false. And let's try it again. Okay, got it. And if I hold enter, nothing bad happens. Very good. Okay, so let's try to win. Oh, I won. Oh, but I didn't go back to the map. So why didn't I go back to the map? Oh, yeah. I'm gonna need a better way of knowing which scene to go to. So my platform scene is gonna also need a next scene. It's kind of annoying, but whatever. So let's say next scene, and this dot next scene equals next scene. It's kind of nice because I already wrote the code for this. So then if we lose, we go back to the current scene, and if we win, we go to this dot next scene. And then this dot next scene is really just the scene that we got there from. Ooh, this one's tricky. Okay, I'm hurting my own brain with this one. So when do we change here? We change here when we go through the portal, but we actually only go through our map scene Oh, which is perfect because we enter the portal, we go to the scene to open, and if we have to go back, that is the current scene. That's the scene that we're on when we're in the map scene. So beginning is right, that's the next scene. Oh, it worked. Oh, and of course now I'm jumping. The last thing I want to do is if I leave platform scene, which happens here or here, the player has to stop jumping. So let's just say player.isJumping equals false. This is a little bit repetitive, but I think this is easier than anything else. So let's go see if I can play the other snake scenes. Okay, pretty cool. Oh, now I'm not running. Okay, so the problem there is that I have to always be running if I'm in the snake scene. So if I enter the platform scene, I want to say player.is walking, actually not running, is true. Oh, I guess if you lose, oh, that's really... Okay, so this is a bit tricky, but what I'm gonna do is say if next scene, that way I can lose, but it won't overwrite the next scene because that argument will be undefined. Okay, so let's test this real quick. I just have to go in here, I have to lose, try again. So yeah, sometimes you have to kind of think through all these things. You guys might not need to use this. Okay, it worked. Okay, I think that's everything. So keep in mind that you guys don't have to do everything I'm doing. I'm just kind of like working out a bunch of different possibilities for what you might want in the game. I realize this is like way more information than what's necessary, but just wanted to kind of do everything with the class oriented or object oriented syntax. So, you know, pick and choose what you think is useful, and obviously I'll publish. Anyway, I think that's pretty much everything. So let's go ahead and I'm gonna add a new thumbnail for this guy and add it to my thing. So this scene is pretty cool. Let's make a thumbnail here. I'm just gonna show fight the snakes, and I'm gonna save that. And so let's close all this stuff. This one was a bit nuts, right? Okay, so let's go back to index.html. And we finally finished this project, although I am going to add a bit more to it if I have time in one more video. And so finally we have probably what's our final version. So I'm just going to call this Snake Forest. That's going to be the name of my game. Okay, project number 1. Snake Forest. Go in here. Do I have the old thumbnail? No, I must have deleted it. So downloads, let's put this in here. And I'm gonna call this v1-6. And let's make sure that works. So I'm gonna go back to my main page. Okay, project number 1, there's the thumbnail, Snake Forest. Looks good. Okay. So a little bit crazy, but you know, that's fine. So let's finish this out. So I'm gonna go to GitHub and say adds scene classes and commit to master and push to origin. So that's it for this video. This one ended up being really long, so I'm not sure what we'll do next, but I'm planning to make another video.